One of Vincent van Gogh's most famous works is the bedroom, which he painted in 1888. The remarkable colours in the domestic subject make it a favourite with the public, but Van Gogh himself too saw it as one of his best paintings. In order to preserve it for the future, it is temporarily removed to be thoroughly examined.
So we're taking the picture up to the restoration studio to be examined.
What is the main reason for studying this painting?
Well, we want to investigate the aspect of colour. We know from the letters that Vincent wrote to his brother Theo that he found the colours in this painting very important.
In lengthy letters to his brother, Vincent wrote, "Looking at the painting should rest the mind, or rather the imagination. The walls are of a pale violet, the floor of red tiles. The bedstead and the chairs are fresh butter yellow, the sheet and the pillows very bright lemon green, the bedspread scarlet red, the window green, the dressing table orange, the basin blue. The door is lilac, and that is all. There's nothing in this bedroom with its shutters closed."
So if we look at the painting now, we can see many differences to the colours that Vincent described in his letters. For example, he described the door as being lilac, whereas it's now obviously pale blue. And similarly, the walls, which he described as being pale violet, which are also similarly blue. So we would immediately think of a red lake pigment, or a red pigment that has faded and disappeared in the paint mixture. And for a similar reason, we would like to know more about the colour change that has taken place in the floor.
Because it has faded, the painting now looks different than Van Gogh originally intended. What do you, as a restorer, see when you look at the floor on the painting?
Well, we know that the floor is very damaged and that it was last repaired or restored in 1931-2. And the interesting thing is, if we look closely at these old restorations, they have a very pinky peachy colour. Yet if we compare it to the surrounding colour of original paint, the original paint is much darker and more purplish. But in fact, the pinky peachy colour of the retouches quite closely matches the colour of the original paint, where it has been protected from the light underneath the frame.
The earlier restoration in the 30s looks badly done at first because the colour is so different. But the way it looks now actually gives a better idea of the colour Van Gogh himself used at the time.
In addition, this information raises a number of ethical dilemmas for the conservator. For example, should we remove the old retouches, which give a very good impression of how the colour of the floor was around 1931-2? And if we do choose to remove the old restorations, and it's decided to replace them with new ones, then we really need to know if the colour of the original paint will continue to change over time, because in that case, my retouches will also soon be mismatched to the original paint.
The painting itself provides a lot of information if you look at the front, the back, the side, and the paint that's normally hidden by the frame.
Well, we can learn a great deal, so we now know that something has happened to the painting, and in particular we know that the colour of the floor has changed quite considerably since 1931-2. But to really understand the change that has taken place and the chemical reaction of the pigments that has caused the visible colour change, we need to take a tiny microscopic sample of paint from the edge of the painting and to have it analysed.
Why do you spend so much time studying the painting before you take a paint sample?
Because we're looking to choose exactly the right spot to take a sample. Obviously we need to look, we wouldn't take a sample from an undamaged area, so first we need to find an area where there's already paint loss, and we need to choose exactly the right spot that we think will be useful to give us the information that we need.
A paint sample is so tiny that you hardly see it with the naked eye.
So the sample is in the tube, and just to give you some idea of the size, we're going to hold a head of a pin next to it. You can see it looks enormous in comparison. So just to turn it round and show you the point of a pin compared to the sample. It gives a better comparison, but you can see the sample is still much, much smaller.
The sample goes to the laboratory of the Netherlands Institute of Cultural Heritage, where the composition of the paint is analysed.
Het verfmonster wordt hier bij ICN ingebed in een blokje gietharst in zo'n mal. Als het blokje is uitgehard, dan haal ik het eruit en dan kan ik het slijpen op een slijpmachine. En wel zodanig dat een dwarsdoorsnede van de verflagen ontstaat. En daarmee kun je alle verflagen zien die de kunstenaar heeft aangebracht. Het is eigenlijk net zoals in deze spekhoek, want van boven is hij egaal bruin. Maar als je aan de zijkant kijkt, dan zie je dat de spekhoek is opgebouwd uit verschillende laagjes. Om de verfdwarsdoorsnede goed te kunnen bekijken, leg ik hem onder een microscoop die kan vergroten tot wel ongeveer 1000 maal. Hier zie je de verfdwarsdoorsnede. Hij is opgebouwd uit 2 verflagen. De eerste laag komt overeen met de verf van de vloer van de slaapkamer. En de tweede laag is een witte verflaag. In de eerste laag zie je verschillende gekleurde deeltjes zitten, die groene en die rode. En al die deeltjes bij elkaar geven de kleur aan de laag. Nou is het zo dat de vorm en de kleur en ook de grootte van de deeltjes geeft al informatie over welk type pigment gebruikt is. Maar als je ze echt wil identificeren, dan moet je nog andere analysetechnieken toepassen. En daarom werken we ook samen met Shell.
In the Shell laboratory where we took the paint fragment, experts have the latest technology at their disposal. Electron beams which they use to determine the chemical composition of each individual pigment particle in the sample.
This is a scanning electron microscope, and we use this microscope to look at the paint fragments in even more detail than we can with optical microscopy. We do that by accelerating electrons into our sample. We scan an electron beam across the sample, and we can use backscattered electrons that come out of our sample to get images. So we can see a backscattered image here. And at the same time, we also generate X-rays, and these are characteristic of the particular elements that we get in the sample. And we can measure the X-ray spectrum and determine the elements that we have in the paint fragment.
The pigments that are suspected of having caused the fading of the bedroom are examined one by one.
We're going to go and have a look at that with the SEM now. Okay, so we've got the sample in the microscope now. Let's go and have a look at what's going on. So, if we look at these images here, these are the optical images from the paint fragment, and there's immediately a few things which are quite interesting to note. We have a top layer here, which is basically a white pigment, but the heart of the matter is down here. We can see that we have a layer which has got some red pigments and some green pigments in it. But what's particularly interesting or particularly important in this sample is what's happening with the red pigment. So what we want to do is try and determine what exactly this pigment is. And from the optical images we can't do that. But if we use the SEM and we go to look at exactly the same region of the sample, so here we have the backscatter image from the SEM, and you can see that this bright little white dot here corresponds with this region here in the optical image. And if we bring the electron beam in and we hold it on this white dot, then we can determine the composition of that particular area of the image. And you can see that here is the spectrum, and we can see that this shows that we have mercury and sulfur in this little region of the sample. So what we need to do now is go and talk to Ella at the Van Gogh Museum.
What are your conclusions based on the discoloration research carried out at ICN and Shell?
Well, thanks to all these joint results, we have a much better idea of the current condition of the painting and the way in which it has changed due to chemical reaction. And this enables us to monitor the change very closely in the time ahead. And of course, we also make sure that we keep the painting under the best optimal conditions of climate and lighting, so that if the change does continue in the future, it will proceed at a very slow rate.
So now you know all there is to know about it?
Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Research always leads to more questions, and the more you know, the more you realise how little you know. So research is never finished.